Welcome to Alligator Preserves, everyone. I am your host, Laurel McHargue, and this is my first interview of the year 2025. So I have a very special guest with me today who is going to talk about a very special man who wrote a very important book. Wes Wells, thank you for being on Alligator Preserves today to talk about your dad.
Thank you, Laura. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I am glad you're here too. And what a way to kick off the year, right? Behind you, and for those of you who are just listening to the podcast, you should go to the YouTube channel and see this. You can see the book Iwo Jima, Give Me 50 Marines Not Afraid to Die, written by Wes's dad. Wes, why do you think your dad wrote this book?
The reason he wrote the book, he really wasn't trying to write a book. He was just trying to write a manuscript of what war was like during that time period to give to his children, grandchildren, and say, war will never be fought like this ever again. And to bring the horrors of war and everything that leads up to it and how you're growing up actually dictates what happens in your life and how it reflected in the war.
Yeah, he knew that war would never be fought like that again. How do you think he knew that?
I really don't know because he never really discussed that other than making that statement. But I guess because of the close quarters, and I mean, there was thousands of people, Marines and Japanese on that island, like 38,000 between on an island that's only 2 miles long and only a couple hundred yards wide. Just, it was awful. It was a meat grinder.
It is unimaginable. And again, a lot of people don't even know where the Marshall Islands are, where Iwo Jima is in that whole that place. It's absolutely fascinating. I want to read to you, if you're okay with this, something from the prologue that he wrote, okay, just to give listeners a sense of what they'll get when they buy this book, and I hope they do. This is in the prologue. Dim outlines began taking shape near the base of Mount Suribachi. I threw the white wool Japanese Navy blanket off my shoulders and laid my Tommy gun on top of it. The captured warm blanket that our platoon runner had literally risked his life for would be of no use in today's battle. It would be left behind. Nothing, I mean, absolutely nothing, had a meaning. Not home, not mother, not wife, not children, not girlfriend, not hometown, not cold, hot, or hungry. Nothing mattered except today's forthcoming battle, and it would commence very soon. His descriptions in this book, would you say, are intense?
Oh, extremely intense. I made a comment after I read it the first time. I mean, I helped him with a lot of the editing and such while he was doing it, but he'd give me chapter one, then chapter five, then chapter three, then chapter 20, and it'd bounce around. And so until I read all the way through when it was published, um, in my mind, I would tell people, they said what it's like. I said, you can actually smell the carbide in the air. You feel what he's feeling. And the book is really pretty intense for somebody who has not had proper education in writing. He took it upon himself to do this on his own with my college English books. And he taught himself how to writing this book.
How old was he when he started writing it?
Gosh, let me think about that a second. He
I
was in
mean,
his 60s.
okay, all right. So it was a while ago. You talk about him not having a formal education in writing. I was going to say that as a former English teacher, his English teachers would have given him high praise for his descriptive and figurative language that's in here. Seriously, I I give him an A plus. I would, oh my gosh. So I was reading about the basic training and having all the gear thrown at him and just all the stuff that he's expected to carry. And, 23-year-old guy, a young guy, going through all this. Do you remember when you were 23?
Only barely.
Yeah, right. I mean, 23, we don't even know who we are yet. But
No.
there's a part in there. He talks about the short arm inspection, and I won't go into details here, listeners, because you gotta read this to believe it. My father, who was a World War II veteran, told me about this, and while we were driving somewhere, and I'm in the backseat cringing, thinking about this thing. It's a medical. Let's just say it's a medical exam for specifically for guys, but
It's a guy thing.
it's definitely a guy thing. Yeah, Iwo Jima was considered, I think, the bloodiest battle in Marine Corps history, right?
Yeah, yeah. And
And yeah,
his platoon was actually one of the most decorated platoons to come out of a single engagement in the Marine Corps for a very long time. They all got medals of some sort.
and so your dad went in again at 23, right at the end, right at the end of the battle, and
Yes, right near the right before Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Yes.
like the last 3 days, I believe. And there was it ended, the battle ended in a flag raising ceremony, right?
Well, the battle did not. No, it did not. It
Well,
continued on, and it's the clearing out the caves, which he goes into detail about. And the Japanese, they were, the mountain, Mount Suribachi, and the island was riddled with caves and tunnels that they used. And so he goes into detail about some of the cleanup they had to going into those caves and tunnels and the things they would find. And some of that stuff was pretty gut wrenching for me to read, knowing, gee, I almost wasn't here.
right, right. I remember a passage when he was talking about seeing all those caves and the ditches, and he said something like it looked like a string of pearls wrapped around an old woman's, sagging neck. I mean, again, amazing word choice in his book. He was an incredible storyteller. Was he a storyteller? Do you remember him being a
Oh,
storyteller
very
growing
much.
up?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Everybody loved to hear his stories, and it, they were pretty compelling. Just different things from, he was a professional geologist, is what he did for a living after the war. And people would gather all around just to listen to him and have him come speak at Kiwanis or Optimist clubs or whatever and talk about either the war or he would talk about his scouting events and scouting trips that he would do.
It,
He was very big.
yeah. So in the Boy Scouts, he got the highest honor in the Boy Scouts.
Yeah, he got the Silver Beaver Award for doing the most for scouting at that time, all through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and up through the 80s and 90s until he started getting almost too old to do it. He still made a trip at 63 with my mom, went up into Alaska. Mom stayed in a hotel at that point, but then he took the scouts on a 9-day canoe trip down the Yukon River.
Wow, nine
Now,
day.
he took scouts completely around the world in 83 days. And I had to sit back in the oil field office and run the business for 83 days.
Wow, wow. That's incredible. He sounds like an amazing character. And again, I don't think I mentioned his name at the beginning of this. He is the late John Keith Wells, and he was a lieutenant when he was uh, engaged in Iwo Jima, and he ended up retiring, obviously very honorably, as a major. In the book, there are so many photos, so many amazing photos, and they have fitness reports back there too, his fitness reports from when he was in, and I remember seeing as far as uh, honor and dependability and outstanding, absolutely outstanding on every report. So what a man. Was he squeaky clean?
Nope. I mean, as far as a human being, yes, he was very honorable. He did everything he could. He always thought of others. He always took care of people. He took care of things. He was a go-getter. He never shied away from anything. He, I don't know how much I can use of language on this show.
Yeah, you can use language because this is for a reading audience.
Somebody came up to him one time and said, "You seem like a real arrogant bastard." And he goes, "Nope, I'm just a super confident son of a bitch." And
Wow.
that was that. He was super confident. Now, did he, play tricks or cut corners or, have fun? Absolutely. He didn't do everything. He was not a by the book Marine. He did what needed to get done, however it needed to get done. And sometimes it was not by the book.
All right. Was there a USO event that might have got him in trouble at one point?
Yeah, well, it didn't cause him any trouble. They just said it was funny. But if you don't mind, I would like to read a passage from the book about that incident, if you don't mind.
I would love for you to do that.
Oh, thank you. At that time, Bob Crosby, who was Bing Crosby's little brother, had his own orchestra, and he was touring with USO. Well, while they were in Hawaii before they got deployed to Iwo Jima, this is the passage that I was going to read.
Okay.
Bob Crosby and a group responsible for the 5th Division USO shows had a show going near my tent. No matter what I looked like, I had to sneak a peek at the show. One of my enlisted friends, Fred Brown from the 27th Marines, who was watching the show, waved for me to come over. He wanted to talk for a minute. His older brother, Captain Bob Brown, was our battalion supply officer on Iwo Jima. I talked to Brown for a short time and decided to go on to my tent. On the stage, hula girls danced to the rhythm and the chant of the musicians. Hardly a sound came from the Marines. I tried to get a cheering section started, but without success. My tent sat behind the open stage, and I decided to get there as soon as I could. My day was over. The drinks, swim, and Jeep ride had taken its toll. The hula girls decided to go to a dressing tent as I was going to my tent. It must have been a terrible sight because the girls looked back and saw me and began running. The men started cheering and I began chasing the girls. That must have been the best show seen all afternoon because more people remembered it than anything else I did.
Wow. Chasing the girls. And the USO shows are all about morale and building morale. And this was what, right before they were deployed?
Yes, yeah, right.
Ah,
They kind of had an idea where they were going, but they hadn't been officially told yet.
yeah. I mean, can and listeners out there, put yourself in that situation, right? And what was being shown, I don't know, what in media then, how much did people really know? Um, yeah, that was intense. And again, 23 years old doing that. I mentioned the flag raising ceremony earlier. There was some controversy around that, wasn't there?
There's been several controversies about that. The one his platoon was responsible for, he was wounded at the time, but he had already commanded them to take the mountain, and then he got wounded and pulled back. Well, his platoon were the first flag raisers on Iwo Jima. There was actually two. The first flag was on a bent old piece of pipe and a smallish flag. And it didn't get much attention, even though it was the first flag raised on Iwo Jima. Well, of course, the generals or the people behind the lines, the captains and such, decided they needed to put a bigger flag up there. Well, by that time, more and more men had climbed the mountain and gotten up there, and they got a bigger flag with a nicer pole, and they had like 8 or 10 photographers and videographers and everything all lined up waiting for the big show, the big flag raising. And when they did, that was when Joe Rosenthal took his iconic picture and it was funny because I was talking to Joe when I was a little kid, asking him about how he got that, because he and Dad knew each other. They became friends after the war. And I asked Joe, how did you capture that? You just got a super fast shutter speed to get it multiple? And he goes, no, we didn't have that back then. He goes, I was actually talking to the guy next to me who was filming it, and he goes, hey, Joe, they're fixing to raise it. And he tapped him. He just turned around and just took the picture. And yeah, Joe said he got $1,500 for that picture. Of course, back in World War II, that was a lot of money.
Yeah, that was a lot of money. And again, we all know, I think everyone knows that iconic picture, as you mentioned. Um, wow. Again, a lot of photos in there. There's a couple of great side-by-side photos of Private Robeson shirtless with Lindbergh,
Yeah.
32 years apart.
Yes.
What was up with that?
That was one of the reunions. Lindbergh was actually in both flag raisings, and you can
Really?
see in both of them. In Chick Robeson, there's a good little story about him in there too, because it's kind of humorous during boot camp and just after boot camp, because he's a little bitty guy. And he wanted to carry a big old huge BAR, which is a Browning automatic rifle. It's a huge thing. And Dad goes, "Nah, you're too small." And later on, you see Chick Robeson carrying his huge BAR, and he actually does get to use it. But the point being is, one of the reunions they had. We had reunions all the time. That's how I got to know all these men and what they went through and watched them cry at beers, at the parties. And those two decided to reenact that same picture that they took on Iwo back, I can't remember. I think it was in Abilene, Texas. Uh, so yeah, they wanted to reenact what they were.
Yeah, amazing, amazing history. And again, first person account by your dad. Um, how difficult was this for you to read? And again, you said that you kind of read and helped and maybe helped organize this. How difficult was this for you to read? Because I think you probably learned a lot about your father.
Yes, when growing up, talking about the war was not a topic we could discuss. We'd ask him and he would put us off. He would never talk about it.
I wondered
I
about
got,
that. Yeah.
yeah. And I got more out of his men when they came to visit for the different reunions getting together. And I'd hear them tell different little stories, but usually they were the humorous stories that unfortunately didn't make it into this book. And this when he decided he wanted to write a book, I made this comment. I told you he was self-taught, and I made the comment, says, "Dad, I'm sorry, you're from North Texas. You don't speak right, and you want to write a book?" And he goes, "Yep." And he goes, "I'm going to do it and show you how to do it." And I taught him word perfect at that time. And then he went on from there to read my English books from college and taught himself how to write this thing. But when I started reading through the book, it was very, very odd because I would read it like a novel. I wasn't reading it as in, this is my dad's first count of what happened to him.
Yeah.
And when it started dawn upon me about halfway through, and then when it started hitting the war, because when he was writing it, I went through a bad time in life, a divorce, and so I had to move back home with my parents, and that's when I was helping him with his prose and his English and a whole bit. And when he got to the point of the war, he just had a bottle of Jack Daniels, and he would just get smashed and bawl and cry, and it was tough to watch him write it.
Wow.
And I think it was good for him to do that because at that point, when I started reading through all this, I'm like going, oh my gosh, he got blown up, he got shot. I'm lucky to even be alive. I'm lucky to even be here to read this. And and then knowing those men all these years and then reading their story in here, it became real.
Yeah.
It was tough.
Were his battle wounds, and again, he's highly decorated, highly decorated. Did they influence how he acted his whole life? You know, you talked about him being a very confident man and someone people would gravitate to. Did his wounds affect him, bother him? Did you notice them much?
Mental or physical?
I guess both. I guess both.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, because
mental
that's yeah.
ones, yeah, the mental ones, no. I never knew him as a kid, of course.
Yeah.
I just knew, his mom passed when he was 11. And so just him and his dad batched it for many, many years during the Depression. And so he was pretty much left to his own accord. So, but I heard he was fairly difficult, but not horrible as a child, hyperactive and all that kind of good stuff. And so knowing him as an adult, I never saw him mentally have any issues with that. His confidence never wavered, ever. As far as his physical, he had a piece of shrapnel from a mortar in his neck that that was there. I mean, they took it out of him when, I think in the 70s or 80s. So yeah, I knew of it. And
Yeah.
he talked about it and he'd let me go feel the back of his neck and I could feel it in there, and he had bullet holes in his legs. And I just never really thought about it until he said, yeah, there was a machine gunner lining up on me, but he wasn't up high enough. So he just kept taking chunks out of my legs.
Wow.
But
Wow.
but until we noticed it or whatever, he never really talked about it. And then I said, well, did you keep that piece of metal? And he goes, nah, I've had it this long, I don't need it anymore.
Oh, I was about to ask you that. Do you have it somewhere
No.
special? And again, he was a man, raised in what they call the greatest generation, like my parents as well. He died just shy of his 94th birthday.
Yeah.
My dad made it to almost just shy of his 90th birthday. Why do you think that generation lived so long?
Well, probably the good, clean living. No, I'm teasing. Because until we came along, he was a heavy smoker, and of course he still
Yeah,
drank. Yeah,
yeah.
he still drank like forever. And so it wasn't that. It just his positive attitude, I think. He would not allow us to talk about negative things about people or things. He goes, you don't need to do that. Find the good things in it. And he was that way. But I think also it's where he kind of came from. He came from a super small town up in North Texas called Lakeview, Texas. It's not even there anymore, other than the farmers that still live there.
Mhm.
Um, and when his brother passed away a year ago, I had to go up there to help bury him up there and
Mhm.
take care of his affairs. And the people I dealt with that took care of the cemeteries, the ones that the farmer that was farming our land up there, I met them all, and you would swear they were in their 50s. And they're just vibrant, good people, always positive, maybe it's the way they eat, their lifestyle, but they're all in their 70s and 80s. But I swore they were in their 50s and 60s. They looked good. They talk good. They walk good. I don't know.
My
That may be part of it.
Yeah, my husband always lives by the saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Doing hard things, right?
Yeah,
Staying active, having
yeah,
a purpose, I suppose.
yeah. And that may be part of the Boy Scouts, always being with the younger people, always doing young men things. And that's what I've always done myself, is he always told me, he goes, find the things you're afraid of or find the things you're not comfortable with and go after it.
Yeah. Challenge yourself.
Challenge yourself. And
Yeah.
and so I continuously still do that today. But
Yeah. I think that's awesome. And again, you talk about your dad drinking and smoking. My dad, I think, smoked for 40 years. I'm sure my mom made him give it up when I was little. The father of five girls, she didn't want him smoking. So I don't remember him being a smoker, but he was a two scotch a night man as long as I remembered him, except for Lent when he would give it up. He would give up scotch for Lent. And then of course it'd be miserable for 40 days and 40 nights. And we were happy to see him drink again. But yeah, made it to almost 90. So like what.
yeah, but well, he wasn't quite that bad. He did quit smoking. I remember him smoking when I was a little kid, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. And then he and mom both quit. My mom is a super cancer survivor. She
Wow.
had stomach cancer twice before I was born. They said she wouldn't live, a few more years, and she
Yikes.
died at 84.
Okay.
So I mean,
Yeah.
she lived a long time, and
Yeah.
dad, he quit, and then I guess when things got really, really stressful, when I was in high school, because I've never smoked, I've
Mm.
never cared. My friends all did, but I never did. And dad would, I came home one time, and dad was smoking a cigarette in the house. And I went, you really don't need to be doing that. And I walked off, and next thing you know, I've never seen him with a cigarette since, and he stayed off of it. But he would go through phases of drinking, and
Yeah.
then he would
Yeah.
not drink for a while, and then he would drink again, probably due to stress or whatever, the whole business.
Yeah. And again, you talked about the mental stress and what the survivors of Iwo Jima carried with them their whole lives and
Yeah.
really didn't talk about until, your dad decided to write this incredible book. It's an incredible book. What are you going to remember most about your dad?
Um, just his willingness to do just about anything and do it confidently and have fun with it. He just had fun doing life.
Yeah.
And that's probably the best thing, but because he did so much for other people, his thing was kids. He loved working with young people. And I will always remember that because
How
yeah.
how many grandkids did he have?
Oh my gosh. Uh, well, I've got my 10. My brother had 3 girls. They're all married and they have kids. My sister has 5 girls and they're all married and they all have kids. And so it's how many great grandkids do you have? I can't,
Lots,
I
lots
know
and
it's
lots.
a lot. I stopped buying presents for them a long time ago.
More than a baker's dozen. What did they call him as a grandfather? What did
Granddad,
they? Granddad?
granddad.
Okay. All right. All right. Because my husband and I are about to be grandparents soon, next month, and we're very excited. So, we talk about names and what do you want to be called? And everyone's like, oh, the
Yeah,
baby will call you what the baby wants to call
yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
Wes Wells,
Yes, ma'am.
where can our listeners buy this book to learn more about your incredible dad,
All
John Keith
right.
Wells?
Well, from what I understand right now, I know for a fact it's on Amazon. You can buy a hardback, paperback, and there's a Kindle version out there. So if you're Kindle Unlimited, please knock yourself out and enjoy it. And here, pretty quick, we are wrapping up the audiobook version of it, which I've had tons of people ask me about the audiobook. So we're wrapping up. We only got a few more chapters to correct, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks, you'll be able to go out to Audible or anywhere else that you can pull your Audible books from, audiobooks from, and
Yeah.
be able to purchase it there. It's again, the voiceover actor we got. I went through 8 or 9 of them that they sent me different people. And I think he is the best one to actually give the good feel for this book to make it read right. So,
That's fabulous. And I know a lot of people don't have time to sit and read anymore. And again, when you're traveling, when you're driving, when you're walking, doing your exercise, being able to listen to a book is fabulous. And I think for a book like this, that might be difficult to read, having it read to you, I think would be great. So we're looking forward to that coming out. And again, I will have links and photos to everything we talked about today on my website at leadvillelaurel.com. Wes, thank you for sharing the story of your dad, his life, this amazing book, Iwo Jima, Give Me 50 Marines Not Afraid to Die. I don't know if he was afraid to die or not, but he was one of them, right?
no, he was not. To give a little history on that real quick,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
running out of time.
Mhm.
The where that line came from is he was talking to his commanding officers, and they were talking about the bunkers. You know, we talked about the pearl necklace
Yeah,
bunkers,
yeah,
and they were trying to figure out how can we take that. And my dad, being the confident person that he is, said, "You give me 50 men, not afraid to die, and we'll take any position." And they said, "Well, okay, we'll hold you to it." And that is in the book too.
all right.
And that, and I thought, that's actually a pretty good way of putting it, because at that time, those men already given up the idea that they're going to be going home whole or even at all.
Yeah,
And it's like, let's do something good.
yeah, yeah. For
So,
country,
yeah.
for country.
Yep.
Wes Wells, thank you for taking time with me today. And listeners, I hope you go out and get this book and get the audiobook when it comes out, which will be soon. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please hit that subscribe button, and you will learn something with every new. My episodes are free. You'll learn something. Write something in the comments below about what you learned from this episode today, and I'll be back with more fascinating people who write fascinating things. And Wes, thank you for just kicking off the air with this really amazing book from your very special father. You have
Thank you very much.
a great rest of the 2025 year. And yeah, keep being awesome, keep sharing his story, and thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.